And Hector Wesley, who's a member of the National Executive Committee, will be speaking to you as well. And if lots of you have submitted your questions in advance, we'll take some of them. But also, if you do want to maybe make a contribution, if we get time in the final part, just let the colleagues know in the chat. I just urge you once again to remember, PCS rules and regulations and standards and code of conduct, and conduct yourself in a responsible way. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Mark Sotka, who's our General Secretary. Very proud of his lifelong commitment to equality, and whenever there's been an issue in which we need his support, he's always been there for us, and he's always supported us and championed us. So great to hear from you, Mark, and the floor is yours. So I think you're on mute, Mark. If we can unmute Mark, is that possible? There we are.
I think I'm unmuted. I'm happy to speak now. I think what Karen asked me to do is to let Hector and Zita lead off Mohammed, so that they spoke first. But if you want me to start, I'm quite happy to do that now. Shall I carry on, or do you want?
Yeah, please. Yeah, please.
Yeah, okay, I'll carry on. First of all, I'm delighted to be able to join people tonight, and I think it's a really good initiative that you've put forward here, that we have a specific session to talk to PCS BAME members and those who are interested in some of the issues. And I'm quite happy, obviously, to listen and take questions later on. I wanted to join, less really for people to hear from me, but because I was keen to listen, and I'm obviously quite keen to listen to Zita and Hector's lead off, and to listen to our black members on this tonight, to hear particularly what people think the union needs to be doing, and whether there's more things that we should be doing on people's behalf. Clearly, we're living in very, very difficult times. Obviously started with the unprecedented coronavirus pandemic, which has caused huge challenges for the union. But most latterly, obviously, with the disgraceful events that have taken place in America and the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement. So I'll just say a little bit about both. Then I'm obviously wanting to hear Zita and Hector and everybody else, and then I'm happy to take questions for people later on. I mean, obviously, as a union, we have now been notified by the Cabinet Office that over 50 PCS members have sadly, or 50 civil servants have sadly lost their lives during the pandemic. We have written to the department and to the Cabinet Office asking for a breakdown of those figures in relation to what jobs they cover, the ethnicity of those people, and particularly whether or not there's a concentration in any particular jobs. But I can say that our early information is that quite clearly there's been a disproportionate amount of our members who have died who were doing frontline facilities management work. And of those people who have died, and there's a higher proportion, nearly all of those came from the BAME community. And certainly those very early figures just confirm in the saddest way of all for us as PCS what we know the national surveys are telling us. And certainly we know that BAME workers are 4 times more likely to die from coronavirus than white workers of the same age. We know that the majority of those people who are dying are classed as key workers. There is more likely to be people from the BAME community who are classed as key workers than white workers, and many often those are in frontline jobs, and they're often low paid jobs. And so what we found in the civil service, just from the early statistics, seems to mirror what everybody is saying across society as a whole. And the coronavirus has not just been difficult for the union, but those figures tell us that for the people watching tonight, this will have been even greater concern for themselves, for their colleagues, for their friends, and their families. So right early on, we raised this question with the Cabinet Office, and I know that our negotiators have been raising in departments, and it's been pretty difficult to get the Cabinet Office, I think, to engage in the way that we have wanted. However, since the situation in America and the murder of George Floyd and the sort of resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, I'm happy to say it shouldn't have taken that. But on the back of that, the Cabinet Office did finally get around to holding a meeting with PCS within the last 10 days. Zita attended that with me, and we were able to use that. And Zita was a very powerful force on behalf of our BAME membership in making it absolutely clear that we'd had enough of all the reviews and all the inquiries, of keep looking at all the statistics. The time had come for action, and that action needed to be very swift in the civil service, and that action needed to be seen to matter to people. So we have tabled a series of demands, and I have written, and those demands include, from our perspective, any risk assessments and any work that is now done looking at the coronavirus, specifically around whether people are in a workplace or at home, must have equality impact assessments done and must take on board individual concerns and be individually tailored to issues that can take on the higher risk that we see to our BAME membership than to their white colleagues. So that engagement has now started in earnest. We're waiting for a reply, Mohammed, to our letter. But I just really wanted to say at this point that the 5 tests that the union have launched for all of our members, specifically included in them, not only do we think that people should still be at home, that people should only be in a workplace if it is essential work, that there must be adequate social distancing and a whole range of safety measures taken in workplaces, including availability of PPE. But I think crucially that there then must be an individual assessment of all staff. And we have flagged up to them very clearly that if that means for our BAME members that they want to see extra provisions made and extra allowances made that mean that people are given the options to stay at home as part of an individual assessment, that is what departments must do. So that gives an indication of the dialogue that we've been having in recent weeks, and I'm happy to take any further questions. But what I wanted to say, Mohammed, in finishing really, is if anyone is on this call tonight, or anyone has a colleague who is worried, who's been approached by their management to go from home back into work, or somebody who's already traveling to work who doesn't feel safe, then they must bring that to the union's attention, either with their local rep or contact yourself, Zita, or our national helpline, where we will immediately take that up for people and try and ensure that people are safe. The final thing I wanted to cover, because all of that was obviously very specific to the work that we're seeking to do around the coronavirus on behalf of all PCS members and specifically BAME members, is just also to say, just finally a little bit about the situation now and with the Black Lives Matter movement. Our union is very much supporting the aims of Black Lives Matter and takes the absolute sort of position that we have raised equality, the fight against racism for a long, long time. But there is a new moment here that we all have to get behind to say that it is time for action and not words. And I'm sure Hector and Zita will talk about that more. But I just wanted to give my commitment as General Secretary of the Union, Mohammed, that we want to be in the front line of ensuring that this is not another period where everyone is outraged. That outrage lasts for a few days and weeks. Politicians say the right thing and nothing changes. That we have to see change, and that change should not just be in society and in our communities, but it actually must also be in the civil service for PCS members. And that must mean eradicating the discrimination, that means BAME members are paid less, that they get less opportunities for promotion and are always occupying those jobs at the more junior ends of departments rather than seeing themselves have the opportunity to go further, faster. So we must make this moment count, and that's very much what our letter to the Cabinet Office has demanded, and we're determined to see that through. So I'll leave it there, Mohammed. I look forward to listening to Zita and Hector and the other speakers and trying to help with any questions. But solidarity to everyone, and the union is fully behind ensuring we get justice for all our BAME members in PCS and for their families.
You heard of
Let me hi. Okay. Am I okay? Can you hear me, everyone? Yeah. So if you're on your phone or your laptop or your computer, please just make sure you are on mute so that it doesn't interfere. Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you for all that you're doing. I know it's been a difficult period for all of us having to work from home, but the fact that you are working very closely with Zita to make representations to the Cabinet Office is very, very important. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk to our very own PCS National Vice President, Zita Holborn. She's a tireless campaigner for equality, both in the workplace and in the union and out there in the community. She does so much and she still looks fresh. And I always ask her the question, how do you even do it? And she's still not been able to share her special tips about how she keeps so fresh. But she's really on. I'm really proud of the fact that we've got a senior leader in our union who's black and who's called Zita Holborn. So the floor is yours, Zita.
Thanks very much, Mohammed. How do I keep fresh? Coconut butter and coconut oil and shea butter. Yeah. Greetings, everybody. Thank you for attending the meeting. I know it's in your own time and you've all had a long day at work. We felt that it was really important to hold this meeting because we're all worried, even on a personal level, as well as trade unionists, and the impact on our wider community, on workers, as individuals in our own families, about the adverse disproportionate impacts of coronavirus. And there are two aspects to the disproportionate impact. Mark has actually covered quite a lot of what I was going to say in terms of what we're doing in PCS. But what I would say is that before we even had any reports or statistics, actually a lot of us were saying publicly that there is a disproportionate impact, something has to be done. Health workers were saying it, public sector work, public transport workers were saying it, including trade union representatives, and particularly black trade union representatives. Because we recognize, because for a lot of us, we're going through a really horrific collective trauma, because the vast majority of us who are black, and I'm using black as we use it in PCS in its broadest political sense to encompass everybody who is black, Asian, minority, ethnic. So when you hear me saying black, I'm talking about what some people may term as BAME, B-A-M-E, but it's the term we use, the political term black in the union. So for most of us, we know somebody that's died of coronavirus or contracted coronavirus and being very ill from it. And for some of us, it may be somebody that's very close to us. And if there's anybody here, I know this could be triggering, even participating in this conversation and this meeting. So I want to say, to convey my and the union's deepest condolences to anybody who may have lost somebody to coronavirus during this period. But if we haven't lost somebody close, we've lost somebody in our community, in our networks. And so we knew way before there was any data or statistics that this was something that was impacting on us disproportionately. And we started to make some noise about it outside, lobbying the government, raising concerns. And we've now had a couple of reports that have been conducted by the ONS and by Public Health England. In fact, the initial report that came out from Public Health England, some people, including the media, saw the original report, and when it was published, they omitted some of the information about the disproportionate impact on black people of coronavirus, which was quite horrendous. It was denied by the government, but there's subsequently been a report by Public Health England that's come out this week, which is completely focused on black people or BAME people. And it has some recommendations in it, because when we met with the Cabinet Office last week and we said, you need to be doing something about this now, black people should be treated as if black workers should be treated as if they're in the high risk group from this point onwards. In addition to that, there would be people that are in the extremely high risk group because they also have some medical condition or disability that puts them in that higher group as well. They said, oh, we're waiting for recommendations from the ONS and from Public Health England. And we made very clear that actually they can't be waiting, because at that point there was no indication that there was going to be any recommendations. And indeed the report from Public Health England is really focused around the NHS and recommendations there. But recommendation 4 in that report does specify something around risk assessments and looking at individual impact. And as Mark has mentioned, what we're saying is that there needs to be a risk assessment, there needs to be an equality impact assessment, there needs to be an individual impact assessment, and that individual impact assessment cannot just look at what happens when you arrive in the workplace. It's got to look at the full impact on your life. And that might mean that might include that you are caring for people that are shielding or in a high risk group or extremely vulnerable. You may live with family members or flatmates that also fall into those categories. And when you travel to work, we know that public transport workers have been dying disproportionately, and they've been predominantly Black. And some of you on this call may be facilities workers that keep our buildings functioning. You know, without you, we wouldn't have been able to open our buildings. That includes the security guards, the cleaners, the catering staff, who are essential to buildings opening, but are also predominantly Black, migrant and women. And also that means buildings open put those groups of workers at risk who are also our members. And so we need to protect all of our members, but we also need to think about everybody else who will be impacted by us traveling to a workplace and being in a workplace, as well as the individual impact. So we're awaiting a response to the letter that we've sent to the government. But what we're also doing is saying to our representatives across the union who are doing negotiations with all the employers, is that these are all the things that they need to raise, the 5 tests. And we, as I mentioned, we're going through collective trauma, not just because of the impact of coronavirus, but also the impact of George Floyd's death, and having to live with everyday racism, microaggressions, as well as systemic racism in our life. You know, for a lot of us who are Black, we have to put a shield on when we go into the workplace. So we're talking about shields now for coronavirus, literal shields. We've had to put on, you know, a shield anyway, just to get us through the working day a lot of the time. So when people are now, you know, there's an international, global outcry about racism in broader society. And we've also had a number of deaths at the hands of the state over many, many years, decades in the UK, who have also been disproportionately Black. We have stood by families and supported family justice campaigns of people who have died at the hands of the state, but also people who have died through racist attacks. And you can see behind me, there is a piece of my art, which is of Sarah Reid. If you don't know about Sarah Reid, I can provide you details, but if you Google her, you will see what happened to Sarah Reid. And she's the most recent person who died at the hands of the state that we've supported as a union. And so people are traumatized and outraged and protesting and expressing their anger and hurt, not just because of the horrific murder of George Floyd. And in fact, it's been spread across our screens globally, but for some people, they haven't watched that video because it's triggering for them, because they've experienced police brutality or their family members have, and it's too hard to watch something like that and too upsetting. But the fact that it was recorded and it was shared globally across the world has meant that it has really actually focused people's minds. And some people think that this is a turning point in race relations, but we've had protests before. We've had mass mobilizations before against racism. I think what's different this time around is one, it's been led by young people, which is fantastic to see, but also painful to see for me, because I don't feel like having spent my entire life fighting racism, you know, my parents' generation coming to the UK and facing no blacks, no Irish, no dogs signs, that the next generation should even have to be doing this. But the reality is they are doing it, and they do feel a need to, because racism is still there. In our own workplaces, we face racist harassment and bullying, discrimination in appraisal, in promotion, progression, even getting a foot in the door in the first place. And so we have got an opportunity to change things and to pin the government down and to say to them they've actually got to do something that's meaningful and real to make a difference in people's lives. And actually the reason why people are dying of coronavirus, black people dying disproportionately of coronavirus, is directly linked to the systemic oppression and racism that we face as black people in society, and in the labour market in the UK. And the reasons are directly linked to socio-economic factors. The fact that more black people are likely to live in poverty, in poorer housing, in the most deprived boroughs, and to be held back in the workplace, in the lowest jobs, and barred from promotion and progression, more likely to be in precarious work, you know, with in outsourced and privatized employments where employers do not treat them equally or fairly. And that's the reason. And what we have to ensure as a union movement, and you know, this is work we're doing not just in PCS. I sit on the TUC Race Relations Committee. It's work that we're doing across the trade union movement, and working closely together, is to counter the negative rhetoric around this. And what we're seeing from the media and from politicians is a blame culture. They're blaming us for dying because they're saying it's because we have particular health conditions, we're prone to certain conditions, and that's why we're dying. So effectively they're trying to shift the blame to us and say we're dying because look, our lifestyles aren't good, we are not living the right way, we've got these health conditions, without looking at what are the factors behind some of those health conditions. Having certain disabilities and health conditions will make us be in an even higher risk group. But actually, we have to counter that negativity and that othering of us as a community in the narrative that's out there around coronavirus, because it isn't just about health conditions. And the health conditions we might have are directly linked to the discrimination and oppression and injustice that we face in society and have faced for years or even decades. And so I think that's an important factor in what we say and how we say it, because what it does is it deepens racism, you know, racism and racist attacks, because othering is a form of discrimination anyway that we face all the time as black people and have faced historically up to this very day in all aspects of our life. And with coronavirus, we're seeing it being done yet again. But as has been mentioned, I think I'm probably, you know, coming out of my time. Mohammed hasn't given me the look yet to say I've used up too much time, but I'm pretty sure I have already. What I would say is to reach out to all of you. Don't suffer in silence. You know, self-care is crucial, and individual self-care is crucial, but so is collective self-care. And as a trade union movement, and within our black structures, we can offer and provide and give to each other that collective self-care. So speak to others, you know, form self-care networks, but come to us as well. You know, we have also a racist incident helpline if you're experiencing anything. We have our National Black Members Forum. In some of your groups, you have black structures and equality officers, and you can contact any of us on the National Black Members Committee. Our details are on the PCS website, but if you email equality@pcs.org.uk, you know, they will put you in touch with us if you need to speak directly to us and you're struggling or having any problems or concerns, or you're not able to make contact with a rep locally to represent you, but do feed back to us any barriers or concerns or issues that you're facing. Actually, what we're seeing across a lot of our employers is they're putting out Black Lives Matter statements in civil service departments, which is unprecedented to see them doing this. But what I would say about that is action speaks louder than words. So, you know, our lives are not just about a hashtag. This is about legacy for our children and our children's children, and about our own livelihoods and our own well-being. So it's important that they do more than just put out statements. Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you very much, Zita Holborn, there, our PCS Vice President. And we've mentioned two things really. One is that this Zoom call is being recorded, and that means that it's going to be put on YouTube. So if you don't want your video shown, please disable your video because it'll be on YouTube. To give people the opportunity to access for those that are unable to join us in terms of the numbers. And then the second thing is we've agreed with PCS the importance of doing a Facebook Live with Zita to talk about Black Lives Matter, to talk about how to tackle racism. And that's going to be sometime in July. Just keep an eye on the PCS Facebook page and we'll be able to get to you on that. I'm going to really quickly, because I'm conscious it's 6:30 and we're running slightly over, but I really want to bring in Hector Wesley, who's our NEC member. He's a member of the National Executive Committee, but he's also the NEC Liaison Officer to the National Black Members Committee, just to give us an update on the recent NEC meeting. And then what we'll do, we'll take some questions that have come in already. When you registered, I'll just get them out, and then we'll take 1 or 2, possibly 3 comments, if you keep them brief, from colleagues who are joining us. So over to you, Hector.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mohammed. I mean, you know, it's always difficult particularly following my sister Zita and the General Secretary, Mark Sotka, because actually they've really well covered a lot of the key things that I would want to say in this type of meeting. I just want to give a few bits and a perspective as a senior negotiator, mainly in HMRC, because I am glad to be the Deputy President of Revenue and Customs PCS, and as part of that being the Equality Coordinator within Revenue and Customs for PCS. And I think for me, we have the term precedent is overused, but it has been, some of the things I've seen and observed in the last few weeks have actually been extraordinary. But in some ways they've been good things, but some ways they've been really, really bad things. I've struggled in the last few weeks having to counter people who will say phrases like, the virus doesn't discriminate, we're all in this together, and having to have that argument in the workplace, outside the workplace, about why in this time, probably more than any other time, equality is really, really important. And we've had the argument. I often criticize my employer quite a lot, but actually in some respects, I will give them some plaudits. So for example, they have done a people equality impact assessment on COVID-19, and I've been pressing them to publish that as soon as possible, to get it out there, to actually have the discussion about the findings of the work that they've done. And what they've done, essentially, they've taken the data that members have given in terms of diversity declarations, and they've cross-referenced that with other databases. So, for example, sick absence data, so they can find out the proportion of members who have taken sickness absence relating to coronavirus on various protected characteristics. I think it's really important that all departments, I think as a matter of course, should be doing that particular work and actually taking on board the findings from that work. We have arguments all the time about return to work, you know, and stuff like that. And I think one of the things for me, which has been in a sense a good thing, but a bad thing, we've been campaigning in HMRC for years for staff to be able to work from home, particularly staff that do telephony work. And we've had massive arguments about it. But as soon as the pandemic hit, everything changed. Rapidly, things started to move. And now we have thousands of staff who for years were never allowed to do any of their work from home, now regularly doing work from home and doing it really, really well, and actually doing a lot of good things as public servants. And that's really, really important. That's really, really good. And I think we're going to have challenges ahead. Certainly, I know, speaking to members, I know members that have been directly impacted. They've been off sick as a result of coronavirus. I know members who have lost family members, sometimes in quite quick succession. That's really, really difficult. And we've got to, as a union, bear those things in mind. People don't often actually say what they're going through in their personal lives, but people need to recognize that it's a difficult time for many, many people. So I think PCS has done a lot of sterling work on behalf of members in actually challenging employers, actually making them do what they should be doing going forward. And certainly in terms of the 5 tests, we're making sure that equality is a heart of those 5 tests. We want to make sure that all our members are treated fair. But you know, in this call, we're talking about black members, but we're quite clear. We want all our members treated fairly. The other members that are impacted by coronavirus, we want their interests to be looked after as well. I mean, I'll just say a few brief words about Black Lives Matter. Again, it was interesting. I mean, to see like in the department, you know, on the internet messages from senior leaders saying Black Lives Matter. I never thought I would see that. However, it was interesting. I put out a briefing in my department a week or so ago. It's interesting. I did get some negative feedback from members of staff, some of whom are PCS members. And that's unfortunate. We do have to address those issues. We do have to have sometimes those really uncomfortable conversations about these issues. Because I'm quite clear. I know there's a lot of members who have suffered for far too long. And, you know, for whatever reason, they come to us and we haven't addressed those issues. I mean, the key thing for me that I find really troubling as a member of staff in my organisation, when we get the people survey results every year, we'll get people say 10%, 15%, 20% of staff saying they've faced race discrimination in the workplace in the previous year. But when we look at the number of complaints that are made officially, it's extremely small. So, I mean, you know, in my organisation, the last 12 months, there were less than 10 complaints of race discrimination. We've got 64,000 staff in our organisation. So the key thing for me is as black members, as members across the board, engagement is really important. Let us know if you're going through issues, let us know, and we will do our absolute best to support you. So I'll pause there. Thanks, Mohammed.
Well, thank you very much, Hector there. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to take some questions that were submitted when you all registered, and then whilst we're listening to the speakers, I've just had a really look at some of them. It's quite a few familiar questions, but similar. And then what we'll do, we'll take 2 or 3 contributions from colleagues. So if you want to speak and ask your question, please just in the chat box, put your name and department, and then colleagues, PCS staff who are managing the chat box will be able to call you and let you know, not call you, but message you to let you know that you are going to be asked to ask a question, but just keep it as brief as you possibly can. I mean, I suppose the first question to you, Zita, is, here we are. What measures are being put in place to allow as many Black and Asian minority ethnic staff to work from home every day that I come to work? I risk putting my entire family in danger of catching this virus. This is from somebody who works, it's 2 questions. Somebody who works in DWP in the job centre, and somebody who also works for the National Audit Office. And I'm assuming they have to come in to audit government expenditure. Zita, do you want to take that one first?
Okay. So yeah, we're concerned not just about the people who are working from home now, you know, and we'll be worrying about any return to the workplace, but of course there are people that are having to work in workplaces right now, and some of them are key workers, who've been key workers throughout the crisis and administering the government's programs, and we have been making representations on behalf of those members who are working in the workplaces. And I would say that if as an individual, you're concerned about being at risk, you're concerned about being at risk because you're Black, full stop. But in addition, if there are other factors, you're concerned about the impacts on your family of you going into a workplace, then I would say urgently speak to a union representative about your situation, because 80% we're told of people are working from home across the civil service area. Obviously, we've got members beyond the civil service, but the two questions have come from people in the civil service. And what we believe is the employer should be looking at the risk to you. You've set out that there is a risk. They have to acknowledge now that there is a risk to black workers, and of course there are risks as well to people who are have certain disabilities or health conditions, pregnant women and other groups too, that they have to do all those assessments that we talked about, the equality impact assessment, individual assessment, a risk assessment, and look at how that you can be protected. And if coming to the workplace is putting you at risk and they can't guarantee your absolute protection when you're in the workplace, they should be looking at alternatives.
Yeah,
so the alternative, of course, is working from home. You know, and if you can't work from home because of the nature of your work, then they need to look at alternative arrangements for you.
Yeah, I just thank you. I just want to give you some solidarity messages that we're getting through. Solidarity from the PCS Culture Group and also from the Northern Black Members Network in YI-Man, is that right, in the Northeast. Thank you so much for them and colleagues from wherever you are across the country. It's great to have you here. There's a question here I wanted to just give to Mark. There's a lack of people of colour at higher grades. This is from Sandra, who works in DWP. I'm assuming she means both within the union and in the employer. What can PCS do to change its own house? You're just on mute, Mark.
Okay.
Thank you.
So there's two parts to that. Obviously, one is the employer and one is the union. I mean, we are absolutely committed that the union at all levels should reflect the membership that we serve, and we do not have that at the moment. We don't have that on the grounds of ethnicity or of sex or of a number of the protected characteristics. And therefore, I think what we have to say is that we should lead by example. I think you've got Hector and Zita on here tonight. There's yourself, Mohammed, who are tremendous role models in the leadership of the union. When we met the Cabinet Office the other day, you know, we specifically took the view that although the national negotiating team was there, Zita very much led off for us on these particular issues. And I think that's like saying to the Cabinet Office, we're going to have somebody here who's affected and understands these issues talk on behalf of our union. So we clearly need to see more people in the leadership. And I think where we have that, we've got to make sure that people are very visible and they're seen to be leading on behalf of PCS. But I think to have people in the leadership, we need more people active in the union at all levels. And so I want to say that anyone who has not ever got involved in our equality networks should do so. We want people to get active locally in their branches. And one of the things that we are doing as a union now is encouraging people who may not be ready to formally want to be a rep to say, I'd like to be an advocate for the union and to get involved, because what we need to see in order for the issues we're talking about tonight to always have the prominence that they require, you need the people most affected by them to be leading on those issues for the union itself. So we've got a long way to go, but I think that having good role models and getting more people active in the union, I think is a very important part moving forward. From the employer's point of view, all I would say, I said at the beginning, it's time for action, not words. And I think that, and I've seen a posting in the chat, you know, we are seeing a lot of organizations make positive statements about Black Lives Matters. But it's no good they make a statement about it if they don't actually take the action within their own organization to make this a reality. And I think the thing that we put strongly to the Cabinet Office the other day was that we have enough evidence. There are enough reports that show discrimination. There are enough reports that show there's a disproportionate effect, whether it's about disciplinaries, about pay levels, about promotions, about making progress in the civil service. they've got the reports. It's time that they actually did something about it. And I think we have to keep pressing them, and we have to make sure that that is not just about symbolic statements. It is about rooting out discrimination. And I've looked at a lot of statistics to prepare for this meeting tonight, and the statistics are extraordinary. They're not just reflected in deaths in the civil service, but if we look at where pay levels are at, if we look at where people are occupying what jobs in the civil service, we see overwhelmingly the BAME members of staff in the civil service are more likely to be focused in the more junior ends, getting the lowest rates of pay and working in the worst conditions. So we have to put equality at the heart of our pay demands, of our negotiating demands, and insist that we see real change. So, you know, that's some of the things that we need to be doing. But I hope that people watching tonight, if they're not already active in any way in the union, get active, because the more we have that, the more the union, I think, will be better able to reflect the concerns that people have.
Thank you very much. Zita, there's one here for you or Hector. My colleagues, this is from Debbie in DWP. My colleagues get stopped by police on the way to work. How can we change this?
Shall I go first? Okay. So yeah, Black people are up to 32 times more likely to be stopped and searched. Racial profiling is a major issue for us. The Stephen Lawrence inquiry recommendations, vast majority of them still not being carried out. I think one of the things is to arm yourself with your rights if you're stopped. And I know for a lot of people on this call, you'll know, because as a mother, I've had to do it. When our children reach a certain age of independence, we have to warn them more of the danger of the police stopping them and what might happen to them than we do about being victims of crime. And so hopefully a lot of people will know what those rights are, because you have had to tell, you know, your family members about them. But if you don't, I think it's something we can put out. There's lots of organizations that we work with, or I work with in the community, like Stopwatch, that provides guidance and help. We have lawyers and law firms that we work with in the union. So one of the things we could do is put out that guidance if people don't have it in terms of what your rights are. But it's also important to report it, and to report it as police harassment and discrimination. Because if we don't report it and document it, then you know, the statistics aren't going to be covered there. So I think know your rights. We have legal services through the union that you can call on. Speak to your union rep. If that's happened to somebody on the way to work, I would say speak to a union rep straight away when you get there, because they'll be in a position to give you some advice and guidance. And not only what can the union do to support you through that, but also what organisations there are out there that are monitoring these issues and are addressing these issues. But it's part of the problem of institutional racism, and it's part of why people are out protesting on the streets and saying we've had enough, no more of this. And one of the things we said at the Cabinet Office meeting, I said specifically, was that, you know, as an institution, the civil service is racist, is institutionally racist, and it's living with the legacies of colonial rule and enslavement, which they have to address if they're really serious about addressing race discrimination.
Thank you.
Might want to add to that.
Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Hector?
Just very briefly, I mean, it's not surprising these things happen. I mean, when the lockdown restrictions came in, it was obvious that Black people were going to get disproportionately stopped and disproportionately fined. I know, speaking personally, I used to take my work ID with me everywhere I went, because I knew as soon as I flashed that, they backed off. You know, but you shouldn't have to do that. But it's just not surprising. But it's just one of those realities that we face. But it does have to be challenged, and I fully endorse and, you know, agree with everything Zita's just said.
And I should have done this before. I also want to say welcome and introduce you to Annette Rochester, who is there cleaning her camera as we speak. She's an NEC member. She's also a very big supporter of the National Black Members Committee and lives this experience. So hello to you, Annette. And also let me introduce to you my vice chair. We come in tag teams. She is from Liverpool, I'm from Manchester. There's a story in itself. She's far more happy than I am at the moment. But Tracy Hilton, hello to you, and thank you for all that you do, keeping me on the right path. So I've got a couple of more questions, and then I just want to bring in a couple of colleagues, if I may. Andrew Roach, are you there? Would you like to ask your question, sir?
Good grief.
So put you on the spot there.
Yeah, like I weren't doing anything I shouldn't have been doing. Yeah. I think my question was, it was noted that there are colleagues, and even unfortunately members who will have quite unpleasant and unacceptable views among us. Have we got the best and most robust procedure in place? And is it timely? Is it, you know, what we don't want is someone has an allegation date, and if it involves a union rep, say, for instance, that there's any delay in it, because that could just allow things to fester. That'd be my question. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you for performing, because I know I put you on the spot there. I suppose if I can just kind of summarize that, I think it's to do with the fact that, Zita, on the Facebook page, we had comments that were being made that were really inappropriate. I mean, what as a member of the leadership team and the NEC, what does the union need to do to make sure that we stamp out that racism within our own ranks as well? You're on mute, Zita.
So I think that we do need to be vocal. Those of us that are in the leadership position, both white and black trade unionists, need to be vocal and speak out when we experience or witness that racism. And actually our white comrades and colleagues can use their white privilege to challenge that racism, because sometimes when we're on the receiving end of it, it's very stressful and traumatic to have to be put on the spot, and we're having to deal with it by ourselves. So I think that's really important as well, because when we're silent in the face of racism, or people are silent in the face of racism, it actually emboldens those that hold racist views to express them. We do have a procedure in the union for complaints, which is called the Rule 10, refers to a rule in our rule book, which people can enact to make a complaint, because I think you mentioned like if there was a union representative that was racist, Andrew. So there is a complaint procedure. We have considered our Rule 10 procedure during coronavirus and having physical hearings, and like with everything else, we've decided that it's not ideal to hold physical hearings. We shouldn't be holding them, because that's what we're saying to the employers. There shouldn't be physical hearings for grievances. They should pause procedures. But in a serious incident like that, what we've also confirmed is that we would make sure that we use the Rule 10 procedure and go through the process and do it in a timely and urgent manner, because racism has to be tackled, straight away. It's not something that can be left. And we do have, a rule in our union that bans people that are members of racist and fascist organizations of being a member of our union. So if somebody's found to be a member of an organization or actively promoting a racist or fascist organization, you may have seen in the news today, this morning, that there's a senior lawyer in the Crown Prosecution Service who has been sharing Britain First petitions, calling for black MPs to resign, calling for Nelson Mandela's statue to be destroyed, and all sorts of other horrific racist abuse on her Facebook wall, which is disabled now, and she's being investigated. So when we find these things, it doesn't matter, the racism doesn't have to be happening in the workplace. If we hear of or witness or find out that somebody is racist outside of the workplace, that is also of concern, and is also something we should flag off, because it's creating a hostile and unsafe environment for us in the workplace. And so again, it's going back to go to your union representative, your local rep, you know, your black network in your group, come to one of us. We can advise and support through the union what to do and how to handle that situation and give you advice and information. And we have a racist incident hotline, 24-hour hotline that people can call too.
Thank you very much, Zita. Is Herma Hughes on the line? Herma, are you there? I'm hoping Herma can hear me. If not, Mark, question from Herma. Is there any possibility as people of colour fighting the establishment as one force rather than splintered, i.e. all BME members from all unions as one force? I mean, I know you represent the union on the TUC General Council. What work can trade unions do collectively to defeat racism?
Who's that for, Mark?
Mark, yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's a really important question. And obviously, there's a number of levels to this. I mean, firstly, all the unions organise and have a TUC Black Workers Conference. And it means that representatives from all the different unions get together from a BAME background in order to discuss issues and to come up with a common position. And obviously that again means black members leading from the front that should shape a lot of the policies of the TUC. I think as with a lot of TUC things, the key is carrying policies at the TUC is one thing, but then we've got to make them happen. And then that often comes down to working together where we can. I think this is a really big moment for working together with Black Lives Matter. And if it wasn't for the pandemic, the union would be encouraging as many members as possible to be marching, to be protesting. But because of the pandemic, we're trying to support a lot of these events virtually and adding our weight with other unions. So I think that's one way that we can come together. I think we also, after the show, though, within our own unions, we take these issues seriously. So on the last question, I agree with Zita. If anyone is subjected to racism from within the union, they really need to complain. And it doesn't matter if that is against a rep. If people have got complaints, they do need to bring them forward. But also, we have to show that we will stand up for people in the workplace. I know within the next 2 weeks, hopefully Hector and myself with others will be meeting the head of HMRC. And this has come about because of sterling work that our branch has been doing, supported by Hector in the group, to deal with real issues of racism in the workplace. And that's been an uphill struggle. That has been a struggle to get these issues taken seriously. And it's great now that HMRC are issuing positive statements. I think what we need to get out of that meeting is that statement is reflected in action on the ground. And I want to just pay tribute here because the hard work has been done by the people in the workplace, you know, and it's not easy when you're having to take on senior managers. Hector's given them some amazing support. Now we've got access to the head of HMRC to put these things to him direct. And I think what that's an example of is whether this is an issue an individual has experienced, whether you think it's part of a collective problem in your workplace, whether you think your employer isn't dealing with things, the union has to be seen to take these things up and take them up robustly from local right through to national. And that to me is the way that unions can work together. So we're marking, protesting, but that we are also taking the issues up with our own employers and in our own workplaces. So I hope that gives some idea as to how we do it. And I think I'd link that back to, you know, the earlier question. When we meet HMRC, I don't want to embarrass Hector here, but, you know, I know that the branch wanted me to be present because they want the head of HMRC to see that one of the leaders of their union is there. But to hear from this directly, they need to hear from our local reps and they need to hear from Hector, who as a black person leads on equality in HMRC. So I think what you can see, that's a multifaceted approach. The leaders must be seen to support, but you need the people who are leading on the front line to be able to articulate it. And that's what we're going to be doing hopefully in the next 2 weeks. And I hope that gives a flavour of my approach to these things. I'm there to support and to give whatever lead I can. But it isn't to pretend that I can voice your concerns. I need to be sitting alongside you and you voice them yourselves.
Okay, we're going to take a final question. Just before that, those questions people submitted, we're not going to ignore them. We'll try to get an answer for all of them and publish them on the PCS website as well. The one that stands out for me, let's take our final question from Floyd. Floyd, are you there? Are you ready? Get yourself unmuted. Just briefly, if you can just put your question.
Yes, of course, yeah. Basically, it's a more a point of information. PCS culture, of which I'm on the GSC. We've actually raised a call for action or statement of intent. That's been drafted by me and a colleague Jasmine in consultation with other Black members in the group, and that's been endorsed by the GEC for culture. It sets out bargaining demands on race equality for cultural institutions and mentions we're going to send it to the National Black Members Committee and the Equality Department before it's circulated. I'd also like to emphasise the high number of outsourced workers in our group and the fact that Black workers are just disproportionately represented in outsourced companies, as well as institutional racism that is endemic in the sector. We are also currently building our network of Black reps and active members to work on the next steps. I think it's very important that this is done because basically a lot of our members in the culture sector happen to be from the band community. They work as cleaners, security, in administration. And the irony is that all these CEOs of museums, galleries, and what have you are happy to take the knee and happy to issue Black Lives Matters on their websites and indeed in their statements, but they don't follow it up when it comes to safeguarding the safety of the members of staff. So that's it really.
Thank you, Floyd. I know you're going to share that with the National Black Members Committee, so thank you so much for that. We've reached the end of our allocated hour. Time flies when you have fun. I just want to say thank you to some of the PCS staff who made tonight possible. There's Caroline Brown, Melissa Wells, Karen Foster, Richard Law, our signer, thank you, sir, Diane Ebanks, and then there's my colleagues. I'm just going to say briefly to Tracy Hilton, just to say hello and thank you to everybody who's the Vice Chair of PCS Black Members Committee.
Hello everyone, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tracy. I don't think you could be any more briefer than you actually were. Thank you so much, Mark. I know you're doing a fantastic job as our leader. Very proud of you. I'm proud of the fact that you are supporting our work from day one. So thank you, sir, for joining us. And as I said, there are lots of questions on here that really need some answers. We'll endeavour to get them answered and published on the PCS website at the National Black Members Committee website. And I just want to remind everyone, we are going to continue to have these events if you, the members, want them. And clearly, at the moment, people are very keen to have these calls. And so if people want to have another one, please do get in touch. And if anybody needs any help or support or advice, I'm already helping lots of Black members up and down the country. So if you do need some support, if you need somebody to lean on, if you need somebody to give you some support or advice, then colleagues on the National Black Members Committee are there for you as our members of the NEC. And then next time, bring a colleague. And if not active, then get involved. The link has been added to the chat box. And there is also somebody who's just joined us today, listening today, participated today, and is actually going to nominate himself to become a rep, because that's the most important thing. Get involved in PCS. And thank you so much, everyone, for the opportunity to meet you all. I can see some of you and I can't see some of you, but certainly we'll be doing future meetings like this very, very soon. And finally, just to plug our Facebook Live with Zita Holborn, talking about how we tackle racism and Black Lives Matter is going to be very, very soon. So keep an eye on our website and on the PCS Facebook page. So from me, Mohammed Shafiq, and everybody here, thank you so much for joining us. Have a safe evening and best wishes to you all. Goodbye.